Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. Also, another announcement that I have to make is I recently created another podcast called Sleepy Butterfly for people who have challenges with sleeping at night or meditating, and it's geared towards people who are auditorily sensitive or have chronic migraines, and being able to have nice, relaxing nature sounds for them to fall asleep to or to meditate to and be able to be refreshed the next day or when they come out of their meditation. So some of the sounds are like chimes or nature sounds like water or rainforest. And again, it's called Sleepy Butterfly. It is on Spotify and also Apple Podcast and Google Podcast. And it's on everywhere else where you can get podcasts as well. So I hope you are able to get some benefits out of that one also. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Hello, so today's episode will be an interview with Anna, who is an ambassador for the NVLD Project, and she has NLD and also some special learning disabilities. And for those of you who don't know, the NVLD Project is an organization, nonprofit, that helps do research on NLD and getting it back on the DSM, and also on providing resources for people with NLD and their families. And when you're an ambassador for them, you write some blogs for them once a quarter, and you also help promote them and do fundraisers for them and help promote events that they have going on. So that's the interview will be with Anna, who is from the East Coast, and this will be the first part of her interview, and then there will be a second part to it in a couple of weeks. Also, I want to thank all the people who donated to my fundraiser for the NVLD Project. It met its goal of 400 a couple days ago, and also that the Ukrainian fundraiser met its goal of, actually it exceeded its goal of 200. It got to 240. So thank you for donating to those fundraisers and for supporting me with those. All right, so today I have Anna Lee with me, and I'm going to have her start with introducing herself to the audience.
Hello, I'm Anna. Let's see. So I am a social ambassador with the NVLD Project, and I've been a social ambassador probably since late fall, early winter. But before that, I've really been passionate to become very involved in kind of advocacy and activism for NVLD specifically, and kind of for neurodivergence in general. I did have learning disability diagnoses as a child in kindergarten. I got a diagnosis of dyscalculia, which is math learning disability, dysgraphia, which is a learning disability of written expression. And for me, that was mostly handwriting. And I also have kind of inconsistent spelling and grammar errors that I have to this day. And later researching about that, that's also part of dysgraphia. So I often wondered if I had dyslexia, but I've never had that diagnosis. And so when I did more research, I realized that that was actually the dysgraphia with that part. But other than that, I got this very vague statement of specific learning disabilities to kind of make up for like everything else. And that left me feeling like there was more to the story. So my entire childhood went by. I graduated from college. I had very inconsistent successes and failures in employment that seemed more based on how I was trained than the actual job itself. My degree's in journalism, so I started doing things like publishing and things that were related to that degree, or looking for work that was related to that degree. So during the recession, I lost my job, and I ended up going back for testing, partly to see what my exact weaknesses and skills were, so I could make better choices about jobs, but also because I had had this kind of burning desire my whole life to know what I had. I didn't feel like the dyslexia and dyscalculia explained it enough. And I don't remember those specific learning disability diagnosis leading to anything that helped me outside of academics. So by fifth grade, I was pretty good at academics, and it was almost like, oh yeah, so her learning disability is only affecting life in math and grammar and spelling. But it was still affecting my life, and I felt like I still needed more. So when I was 28 years old, and that was 11 years ago, I finally got the NVLD diagnosis. And in a lot of ways, that's been one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, so thank you for that introduction. That definitely makes sense to me why you went back and got more of a clarity for yourself, because you wanted to see like you were saying, why some of your what some of your weaknesses and strengths were, and I like to call the weaknesses differences because it's a little bit of a different word, and I think a little bit more positive word. But yeah, for me, I got diagnosed when I was in college, and out, uh, I always had like a personal hunch that I was different from everybody else in my family, and I had, I think that hunch became stronger when I was in high school because I was comparing myself to my older brother, Jonathan, and just seeing that some things like math and writing and science, when it had math in it, were easier for him than me. And so when I went to college, that was the first time that I was in a traditional brick and mortar school because I was homeschooled before then. So I was able to get tested more easily than before then and get a diagnosis. Um, I was tested when I was a child, but there wasn't enough to swing me one way or another with the
Mhm.
results, um, which can happen to some people. So I guess I could say I got tested twice, but you know, like I said, the first one didn't really count in my mind. Guess I didn't remember anything. um,
Makes sense to me. Yeah,
what did you say?
I said it makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and when I got tested in college, I just found the tests really fascinating because I actually kind of found them fun to do. Um, they weren't like any other tests I had done, and they were. I think I did maybe 15 or 20 of them. There were a lot. Um, and some of them were like the ink dot test that some therapists have you do. You've probably seen that before. Um, and another one was, I don't remember the name of it, but it had you like do a lot of mental math really fast to see how much you could do in a time period. I was like, oh crap, I'm not going to do well with this one. um,
Yeah, that was not my favorite one. I remember reading about that part of my testing. I'm like, yeah, that didn't go well.
yeah, yeah. Like some of them, you just know they're not going to go well. Um, but outside of the podcast, what I do is I work for my parents, and my mom is a minister, more spiritual than religious minister, because it's for unity, but it's more
Okay.
spiritual than religious as well as I can describe it. Um, and my dad's the facility manager at the church, and basically what I've been doing for about 9 months now, as full time for them, is I'm the admin assistant there and social media support. Um, and then I also am their COVID janitor. So I clean up after the staff on Sundays because we do virtual services. So I just make sure that everything is sanitized after they leave.
Okay.
Um, so that's my full time job, and I like it a lot. Actually, I'm learning a lot about myself, and I'm I think I'm lucky that it's with my parents because they know about my NLD, so they're able to help with
Mhm.
that. Um,
Yeah.
and I can kind of understand the math dyslexia piece that you have because I have a little bit of dyslexia myself, I think, where sometimes not with math, but with letters, where I flip them when I'm trying to spell them.
Mhm.
I don't do it as much as I used to, but I used to flip like I and E when I
Mhm.
was spelling words. Um, and sometimes when I'm saying something, I say it differently than I was thinking in my head.
Yeah.
And I was like, why did I do that? How did it come out right? So I can relate to that. And then the dysgraphia, I've talked to somebody else who has that too. And I think I've never been diagnosed with that, but I think I might have had a little bit of that in college because um, before my mom was helping me with my essays, because I was a sociology major, um,
Mhm.
I wasn't very good at writing, and she made it much easier for me to get better at it just by helping me proofread and helping me edit my essays. So, because I had a hard time with getting my thoughts from my head onto the
Mhm.
paper um, or onto the computer when I was typing them. So
Yeah.
I can relate to that one too. Um, so you already answered when you were diagnosed with NLD. Do you know what caused it at all?
So the neuropsychologist who diagnosed me, he said that like he, and I don't exactly remember the question that led to this, but he said that there obviously it's not like, there might be more than one reason, but there is a genetic component, but the way he said it is it's not necessarily like NLD parent or NLD grandparent and down the line like that. He said that it could be genetic with family members with ADD, family members with dyslexia, family members with autism.
Mm-hmm.
So looking kind of just through my family tree, there's a whole lot of uh, people who were very successful, but also, obviously generations back wouldn't have these diagnoses, but also had a lot of criteria that could have been AED, could have been this thing, could have been that. So in our family, we've always kind of gone along the idea of it being genetic. I don't know any science behind that or if there's anything else, but that's always been kind of the way it's been thought of within my own life and my family. And to me, that like I feel very comfortable with that concept. And that also kind of helps with my sort of sense of self. So it's not something that I feel like happened to me or isn't part of me or anything like that. It's the me that I was always gonna be. And that sort of results in a whole lot of self-acceptance I've developed because I'm like, well, I'm gonna love myself. And if I was always going to be this way, because this is my genetics, I'm going to love myself for the whole picture, the talents and the challenges or struggles or differences that it brings to the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing it that way has also been pretty helpful with my level of kind of self-acceptance and pride in who I am.
I like that. I like that you are accepting yourself for who you are. And I like that because I know sometimes I have a hard time with doing that for myself. And I think I'm getting better at that. And I think I've gotten better at that since I started the podcast last year
Mhm.
in July with just talking to different people about NLD, whether they have it or not, being able to learn more about it and realize that if it's genetic or if it was caused by a trauma, then it's something you kind of have to learn to live with,
Yeah, I mean,
unfortunately.
it's still you no matter. I mean, it's still, I mean, the way I see it, I know everyone sees it kind of a different way. The way I see it is it's still you no matter how it did start or what did cause it. And so just sort of no matter what, feeling very comfortable in that. And it sounds really cheesy, but loving yourself anyway is really important in my path. And I did find it kind of funny that you mentioned that you started the podcast in July. I actually started my NLD blog in July. I wanted to do
Hey,
this, but I finally made it happen.
interesting.
Like just going on back in July.
That is interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe something was on the same wavelength with NLD advocacy there or something.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about trying to create a month or like an awareness month for NVLD.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, I don't know if everybody would like the idea of having that with NLD. So
Mhm.
I thought maybe a podcast would be better because um, I I'm pretty good with audio things, and I've gotten better at writing, and I like creative writing, and I realized that once I started doing this, it became a passion of mine, and I
Yeah.
couldn't stop.
Yeah. And it's such a great, I don't know, it's to me, advocacy, it's such a great feeling to really connect with other people and help them while also kind of helping yourself along your whole path. So I've gotten very involved in following other advocates across neurodiversity kind of in general. And I thought I've had good self-esteem for a long time. Like I had good self-esteem about as a child because my parents were very open with me about what my diagnosis was back then. And then I kind of had a less self-acceptance about it when I was a teenager for a little while, and I kind of got better about it. But following other advocates, doing my own blogging, being involved in the NVLD project, I found myself feeling even more accepting of myself in ways I didn't even know I wasn't accepting myself. So it really makes a big difference to help others just for yourself, and helping others, but for yourself as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have been involved with NVLD Project because I use the blogs that are on their website that other people post.
Mhm.
Um, because before I was able to find other people to interview, that was kind of a way for me to get a perspective of people who have NLD, um, or know about NLD to provide for my podcasts. So that's why I use those. Um, and for me, I was thinking the cause of my NLD was genetic too, because um, my dad is adopted, so I was thinking that it probably came from his side of the family because we don't know that much about his side of the family. Um, I don't know if it came directly from him or from somebody else in his family. Um,
Mhm.
but uh, it, you know, sometimes because I have an LD, I can't help but see that some of the characteristics in me that might be common with my dad. Um,
Mhm.
so sometimes I think he might have it, but I'm not sure about that because he's not, he doesn't have a diagnosis.
Mhm.
Um, but, uh, you know, like I said, that's just me looking at it through my lens. So,
Yeah. I know.
um,
At the point where slams, I'm like, I think that person, obviously, not telling them or like,
right.
but like, I wonder if that person, oh, that person, that famous person, I think that had NLP, just sort of really noticing it out in the world. Um, when you start to kind of identify your own traits and sort of noticing in others is kind of an interesting experience. I
Yeah,
can even family member that, I wouldn't be surprised if this family member, if they lived in a different, been diagnosed with it. So,
yeah, you're right. I think I might do that a little unconsciously. Like, I know I remember when I was working with children in my mom's Sunday school at her church, I would sometimes wonder if they had autism or another learning
mhm,
disability or learning challenges, I like to call it. And I wouldn't ever ask the parent because that would be a touchy subject.
mhm,
But I
yeah,
would just wonder in my mind because I have worked with autistic children, so I know some of the um,
mhm,
characteristics, and I know some of the characteristics of ADHD because I've worked with both of them, and so I can't help but notice it.
yeah,
Um, and so, and we did have one that had Down syndrome because we knew that for a fact. That one
mhm,
is sometimes easier to notice.
mhm,
Um, so I was usually when the Down syndrome one was there, I was, helping with him because they knew that I worked with those kids. So
Mhm.
I think that was an advantage for me. Um,
Mhm.
and I always felt like I could relate to them better because of having an LD.
Yeah.
Um, so, uh, what I was also going to ask was, how do you feel about having an LD and your other learning
Mhm.
challenges?
So kind of it sort of goes back a little bit to, I mean, the way sometimes I've kind of described it as I've been kind of reading through advocacy and stuff, I almost think of myself as, so there's identity first language and first language, and it's very a personal choice of which you want to use for yourself. And sometimes people use both, but for any listeners who want to learn more about this, so person first language would be saying person with NVLD or person with this disability. And identity first language would be saying kind of like autistic person, NLD or something like that, where the person feels more comfortable just kind of identifying with their diagnosis as something that's a big part of who they are, not necessarily in like a way of, you know, in actually definitely not in a negative way, but just a way where they kind of barely identify with it. So I see it as the reason for my strengths. I see it for the reason for my weaknesses. And I just see it as very much a big part of who I am. So that leads me to feel overall comfortable with it because I don't know who I'd be without it. My life's choices, my perspectives, the way I navigate the world, and the things I've chosen to do in my life are all very connected to ways it's affected me. But there are little bits and pieces that I'd happily not have, like, because I mean, I'm a journalism major. I've loved writing since I became, I mean, I had a reading delay. I had a therapist that specialized in NLD that said some people with NLD learn how to read when they're 3, like they're hyperlexic. And then she told me that there's another set of people with NLD who learn how to read when they're like 11 or 12. And then they're strong readers after, or they're, you know, um, able to read after that. And I was definitely in that like other group. Like it took me a long time to learn how to read, but then suddenly when I was like 11, I read Anna Green Gables and I didn't understand all of it, but suddenly after I read that book, I suddenly was able to read.
Huh.
So that was, you know, if I hadn't have talked to that therapist who specialized in NLD, I would have, you know, my teachers were shocked. They had never had a student that was like that before. Um, but I mean, as a writer, as somebody who has really wanted to be a writer since I was probably around 10 when I started to be able to read and write, I would really love to have these spelling and grammar issues go away.
Hmm.
I've my handwriting to get nicer because sometimes I worry about people seeing my handwriting and thinking less about my abilities, for example. Like I had a boss once that one time I mentioned to her about my handwriting. She goes, I've noticed that for a while. And it was funny to her because she really liked working with me. But sometimes I know that that has affected my path as a writer. So I've had success in journalism under managers, under editors that didn't mind correcting my errors. And I've lost jobs in journalism under editors who were not okay with that. So I'd be really happy if that could go away, just because it does get in the way of my passion. And it would be fun to be more athletic, to be able to, you know, I would love to be able to do some athletics a little bit easier than I do. I love music. I would love to have more dexterity and been able to learn to play the guitar, for example. You know, those are the kind of things that I would be happy if those could go away while keeping some of my verbal skills and some of the ways that I look at things in a creative way, and even accepting some of the other things that are different. I could be okay with, but some of those skills that can kind of get in the way of doing things I know I'd love if I had the ability to do them are some of the things that I wish were not a part of my specific NLD experience.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because as I think of some of the challenges I experienced with NLD, I know that I wish some of them would, I guess you could say, disappear or go away, like you were saying. Like I know I have challenges with grammar and spelling too, and um, that can sometimes get in the way of my writing with the podcasts. But you know, I have a tool. I, I guess it's an extension of one of my Google things called Grammarly that helps.
Mm,
I don't know
yeah.
if you've heard of it, um,
Mhm.
but it helps because it will suggest when your grammar is wrong or when your spelling's wrong, and when you've missed a word or something like that. And that helps me because sometimes I fill in a word in my mind when I'm reading it to myself,
Mhm. Yep.
but I don't, but the word's actually not there.
Yeah. Like I'll be like, I did such a great job right now. I'll wait a few more days later. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
all those errors.
Oh, yeah. I was reviewing something the other day that I wrote, and there were like over 100 errors in it. I was like, oh crap. So um, that's why I have Grammarly, because I know that grammar is not my strong suit, especially commas.
Mhm. Yeah.
I forget where to put them. Except for maybe some. Oh,
It went out a little bit.
yeah, I think you froze for a second. What were you gonna say?
Okay, so did you? Um, let's see, what was I gonna say?
Maybe something about
For
grammar.
me, yeah. For me, it seems a little bit inconsistent, which is why I mentioned that because, and I don't know. I mean, I know that it gets worse when I'm tired, but sometimes it just seems to do what it wants to do. So I've had time periods where I worked at one job where I didn't actually disclose anything, but I did say I want someone to proofread my work.
Hmm.
One of my coworkers, she was educated to be an English teacher. So it was an educational nonprofit startup, but her educational background was being an English teacher, so she took on the proofreading. And there would be some weeks where she would get back to me in like minutes. And I'd be like, "Wow, you're a fast proofreader." She goes, "It's not hard because you don't make much errors." And then other weeks it would like take longer. I'm like, I bet that day I had all the errors. And it was just, I could not put my finger on why sometimes I would write more cleaner copy than others.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's actually, I actually, in my blog, one of the reasons why it took me 10 years to actually start blogging was because I kept waiting to be in a situation where I could hire a proofreader. For a while, I would try and see if friends could do it, and it was always inconsistent, and it just didn't work with the flow of kind of trying to write something regularly. So this summer, I just got this idea. I'm like, you know what? It's going to be about being honest about how my NVLD and dyscalculia and dysgraphia affect my life. And I just came up with this idea to put a little disclaimer on the bottom of the blog and explain that. And the disclaimer does say that there may be errors from time to time, and the author has decided to let them be there if she has not been able to catch them at time of publishing. So I do try and edit. I do try and um, clean it all up. But for example, if I ended up finalizing a couple days before I publish it every other Wednesday, I publish it anyway, and that's sort of part of the point of doing it for me. So I am showing how this can affect somebody's life. So I'm going to let the mistakes just be there. And obviously, if I was writing for a publication, I wouldn't do that. I'd find ways to make sure that didn't happen. But for the blog itself, to me, just being fully honest of the reality of how all this affects how I presented, how I, put things out into the world, that made a huge difference with actually starting to blog and starting to just kind of follow that dream.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because I sometimes have a disclaimer in some of my podcasts where sometimes if the topic is kind of triggering to some people, where if it's, sometimes about something traumatic that they might have been through, whether it's for me personally or for the audience, I let them know about that because then I want them to be aware about it before they
Mhm.
listen to it. Um, and also, sometimes I I get chronic migraines, so I will sometimes if I have a really bad one, that will affect how I read the script, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate, but I will kind of just disclaim or put a disclaimer about that while I'm reading the script,
Yeah.
because then that doesn't make me feel as bad or it
Yeah.
explains why. Um, so I can relate to what you said about your blogging with
Mhm.
that.
And
And
that
it makes
honesty,
sense.
yeah, that honesty goes a long way for others.
Yeah.
I've been listening to your podcast as soon as I was told about it a few months back, and there's just something so open and real about telling that truth, and it made me feel more. I don't know. It made me feel more kind of connected to you and listening to you, because I was like, yeah, I've had, like I don't get migraines, but I've had this feeling that made it a harder day to do this goal or that experience, that was like that. And it just felt really good to have somebody be out there, still doing the podcast, but being honest about what they were experiencing. So thank you for putting that in there.
Oh, thank you. I I know when that happens, I'm like, damn it, this is not. It's going to be a hard episode for me to push through because I try to take something to take the edge off of
Mhm.
my migraine, um, but it takes a while to kick in usually, and so while I'm reading the script, I have to wait for that prescription to take effect. um, so
Yeah.
um, that definitely helps when I do the disclaimer because it kind of gets it off my mind for a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
Also, another announcement that I have to make is I recently created another podcast called Sleepy Butterfly for people who have challenges with sleeping at night or meditating, and it's geared towards people who are auditorily sensitive or have chronic migraines, and being able to have nice relaxing nature sounds for them to fall asleep to or to meditate to and be able to be refreshed the next day or when they come out of their meditation. So some of the sounds are like chimes or nature sounds like water or rainforest. And again, it's called Sleepy Butterfly. It is on Spotify and also Apple Podcast and Google Podcast. And it's on everywhere else where you can get podcasts as well. So I hope you are able to get some benefits out of that one also. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, you can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.